Hey everyone, it's Michael. Today we're talking to Mitch McCline. Mitch has been a contractor and he's worked on many different marketing and technology projects. His specialty is really getting the human aspects of technology out and making sure that actual people can use the things that he is building. He lives in the US and he's working for a company that is international. He's been working remotely for the most of that. We're looking forward to talking to him to find out what he thinks is coming up in the future. Welcome to Nerds Out of Water. Hi Mitch, how are you doing today?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
Very good, very good. Do you just as an introduction, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to where you are now?
Give yourself a bit of a plug.
So 12 years ago, I got a job with no experience whatsoever at a design agency in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. From there, I taught myself basic web development, ended up running, like half a dozen or more accounts for different ones of their clients that were just solely my responsibility. After doing that for about 4.5 years, I started contracting for them and a few other agencies. So since then, I've just been working for myself. The last 6 years, I've worked for an organization that Michael, we used to work at together. And I've been focused mainly on email automation, digital customer experience, basically the people side of technology. So My whole career has been focused on building applications and interfaces that, for people to consume, mostly customer facing applications.
Wow.
Nice.
Cool. I noticed that Michael and I have got the suns on our shoulders and you've got the lights on. Whereabouts are you?
Right now, I live in San Diego, California.
Oh, wow.
So it's nice and warm.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah. I used to live in Phoenix, Arizona, so warm is a relative term.
It is.
And compared to South Florida as well, it's definitely warmer there than it is here. So to me, it's actually quite cool here.
Anything below 25 degrees and it's a bit chilly here.
Yeah. Where are you at the moment, David? Are you in Canberra or in...
Where am I? I'm in Brisbane today. Queensland. Wow. I'm in Queensland today.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I fly around the country. I could be anywhere.
Well, so. Mitch, you've been working remotely for a better part of your career, I guess. But what sorts of things do you like or dislike about working remotely?
So working remotely definitely was a progression. Obviously, I started doing it before a lot of people were working remotely. Not that I was, a minority, but obviously in the last year, everyone kind of got used to working remotely. I really like, out of working remotely in the years that I've done, I really like the flexibility to be able to travel while still working, and also just, the flexibility with your schedule because you own your own schedule, owning my own company, working as a contractor.
Yeah.
I dislike, I guess, it can be a little bit isolating. And also previous to the last year with the pandemic, communication was somewhat of a struggle in early parts of being a remote worker, and just that, not everyone was used to Zoom and, properly worded emails and, communicating with somebody in that way, because they're used to just, I'll just go over to their desk, we'll have a quick conversation, where you can pick up the phone, but there is a lot of communication lost when you're not at least looking at the person while you're communicating with them. But I have to say the pandemic has solved like most of my dislikes about remote working, because now everyone's on the same page and communication has definitely gotten a lot better.
But people have had to learn all of the facial expressions that they would normally pick up at a table or a coffee cooler and move from there, because you pick up so much from that. And now you have to look around the room, a virtual room, and half the time you're not picking up the folded arms and the angry expressions, and you're thinking, I have got off track here.
Yeah,
definitely.
Or you're looking at the screen rather than the camera, and it's like, which would I look at?
And I think also people had to get used to those facial expressions, because I've definitely seen a progression where people have gotten more used to it. But in the very early parts of the pandemic, you definitely saw people's faces just change. I don't think they knew everyone could see that, because, they're sitting alone in their house at their computer, and you're like, oh, yep, I saw that.
And the eye rolling.
Yeah, and the eye rolling.
I was only speaking to a lady the other day, and she still isn't sure whether she should get changed to go on Zoom meetings or not, because she doesn't turn the video on. And I said, you really need to separate your home life from your business life. You need to keep it separated so you can be in two different zones.
Yes, definitely.
I think you've told us before, Mitch, that you do that pretty well, don't you? You switch off and don't worry about it.
It was a learning curve. So basically, for I guess the first 3 years, I worked 24/7. I never took a day off. I pretty much, any time that my phone dinged with an email, I was right on top of it. Anytime a client would call me, I would answer, no matter what time of the what time of the day it was. But after 3 years, got a little bit burned out in taking that approach, because it's not a very healthy approach. So I definitely recommend to people who are working from home having a dedicated space. And for me personally, I don't really enter this space outside of work hours. So I have my desk set up and everything. If I need to, if I needed to use my laptop, I would, but I even have a separate laptop. And then the other thing that I've done to create that separation is separate phone. So I have a work phone that's on while I'm working, and then it goes off when I'm not working. And I have that clear separation between my personal life and work life, just to be able to be sane and have a good balance between the two.
Yeah, well done. I agree with that. So you do a lot of mail work. You've done a lot of work with emails coming in, and using AI, or what are you using there?
Not using AI yet, but I would love the ability to. I know people are in the email space. Mm-hmm. For the most part, it's just, data segmentation. So finding opportunities within people's databases for, find different segments of customers and send highly targeted, personalized emails to certain segments. And then in addition, I guess it's also just finding opportunities for automation. So taking what a business does and some of the processes that they go through, and finding ways to automate that, or to, make those customer touch points an automated email instead of a person having to do it.
And to do that right is quite difficult, to make it not sound like a computer is directly responding to you.
Exactly. The inbox definitely is a lot more of an intimate space, if you will, than the web. And people expect that intimacy, and they expect that personalization. They expect that more human interaction out of their email. I don't think many people know that basically, like, none of those emails were written just for you. But we like to try to find and make things as relevant as possible, and find that point in the customer journey when that message is the most relevant. So it's a tricky game to play, and you're obviously not going to hit everyone, in that part of their journey. But, luckily data gives us the opportunity to be able to know where they're at in their customer life cycle and customer journey, and maximize on that at the right time.
It sounds like you really get excited about that sort of that thing, because you just people won't be able to see this, but I can see your face, and it's full of eagerness and excitement.
Yeah, out of all the different roles I've done, everything from web development, analytics, a bunch of other different roles, email is definitely the one I love the most. Also, partially because of the challenge. Like, it's not dynamic, it's not in real time. You're sending out a static user, static experience to these people's inboxes. And I also appreciate the human connection that the inbox offers that the web really doesn't. People are a lot more guarded on the web, but once you get into their inbox, that guard kind of lowers a bit. And I've always kind of found that fascinating, and really get excited about all email projects, probably more so than web or anything else.
Cool.
And it might be overstating it, but you've become a bit of an ambassador for Litmus as well, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I actually owe part of my whole email journey started with Litmus. So at the agency I work for in Fort Lauderdale, they came to me after our web developers completely failed to build an email properly. And we'd already promised the client that we would get this series of emails out for them using MailChimp. So I just got tasked knowing nothing about how to code an email, barely knowing how to code a web page. Like, hey, can you fix this? And I was like, well, I don't know what it looks like in Outlook because, I'm on a Mac. I don't have Outlook. So I went to the owner of the company and was like, hey, I found this tool. It's called Litmus. I need it to be able to know what everything looks like. So that basically started me poking around at email code before there was any standardized templates, very little information. And we were basically slicing JPEGs into tables and hoping that Outlook would render it properly. So my whole email journey started with Litmus, and I've been using them solid throughout my career for the last 12 years.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great tool as well. We both use it quite considerably, and I mean, I've seen the article that you had on their website, which was amazing, and it's nice. Congratulations on that.
Thank you, appreciate it. That was a lot of fun.
What part does user experience? I mean, you were talking about how the personalization and the intimacy of the inbox. What part of the user experience do people play in when you're designing this technology?
I mean, I'm completely biased, but I guess all technology that I work with and create professionally has people at the forefront of the focus. I mean, there is definitely software out there that is built to basically be consumed by other software. So you're producing data to be consumed by other, software that then eventually ends up with a user way down the line. Where I like to stay in my career, I focused more on that customer facing experience. So really all the technology I work with has people at the forefront in mind, and trying to not necessarily know what they're thinking, but, tap into how something might be perceived, to make it as easy and intuitive as possible, but also, back to the inbox and trying to find the most relevant message at that time. So you're kind of trying to get in the heads of these people and try to figure out how to deliver exactly what they're looking for, even though they didn't know that they needed it yet.
Yeah, I know that when I look at my personal, well, either of my inboxes, they are, especially my personal ones, absolutely full. And to choose the ones to read, it would be very difficult. That whole digital experience of that's evolving, how do you see that going from here? How do you see email digital experience evolving from here?
We're potentially already, I guess, starting the transformation of email. Google adopted AMP for email, so it's accelerated mobile pages. Framework used on basically any news website out there. To get into Google News, you pretty much have to build an AMP application to serve up that content. Gmail and Google have adopted kind of a subset of AMP called AMP for email. And basically what it allows you to do is build, instead of having those static experiences, fully interactive experiences. So we can tap into now, and I've built some, interactive like sliders and different components. But with AMP for email, you could actually, do asynchronous calls to data, have people do transactions, complete forms, dynamic pricing, any of the abilities that you have with JavaScript on the web, you can find a way to adapt into AMP for email. So hopefully that will be the
email.
Exactly. And even, abandoned cart emails where you can just click buy, that one-click buy experience that everyone chases, just like Amazon. So hopefully as that technology kind of evolves and gets adopted, Gmail is about 28% of the global market share of email clients. I mean, with that much usage, once those users start to see that, other email clients will hopefully adopt that technology, and we can kind of start moving in past the static experience into a more dynamic and, content rich experience.
Yeah, nice.
Awesome. Well done.
Hopefully, we shall see. There's some major issues with the technology, as there always is with early technology, and bringing in anything dynamic into something like email with all of the phishing attacks and different ways that you can manipulate email. It might be a little while, but I'm sure we'll get there eventually.
Oh yeah. the security behind it is going to be pretty important. But I think that if anyone can do it, Google will.
Exactly. If it was Yahoo, I wouldn't have the confidence, but it's Google. So
we're now going to trust Google with our security. Yeah. There's two conflicting thoughts in my head about that.
Yeah. 10 years ago, I think Australia was a very different place in terms of technology, and the US was way ahead of Australia. And we had. I always talk about, when I came to Australia, the supermarkets weren't open on Sundays, for example. But, in terms of technology, there's always been a bit of a cowboy nature here. How do you see the difference between the US tech industry and the Australian tech industry? I know that you've worked in both areas, so.
Yeah, in total, I think I spent like 12 months working in Australia. And I definitely did notice a clear difference in cost for technology. I mean, everything from laptops to, like home entertainment systems and I guess it's just the lower population, but especially smart home technology was a lot more expensive in Australia. And I think, at least from what I saw anecdotally, definitely had a lower adoption rate, probably because the barrier of entry is a lot more of an investment than it might be here. And the lower population of Australia compared to here also doesn't create a very cheap secondary market. So, I mean, if you go into like your guys' Gumtree or Craigslist, any of those secondary markets, you can buy smart home technology for a fraction of the cost that you would pay for it brand new. Where there, if it starts at already so much higher of a cost, you're still looking at a reasonable investment to start to adopt some of that smart home technology and other technology. And, as far as how often you're going to upgrade a laptop, well, if it's, 1.5 to 2 times more costly over there than it is here, you're not going to be adopting those faster processors, more RAM, faster storage as quickly as you might in the States.
Yeah,
no, you make it last as long as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And I think the adoption over here is a lot slower because of multiple reasons. But it'd be really interesting to see what it's like in 10 years' time. What is your favourite bit of smart home technology? Do you have a favourite piece?
I actually don't have a favorite piece, but I do appreciate just the automation capabilities, like the IFTTT and like all of the other ways that you can connect these together and automate. I'm also kind of a bit of a privacy nerd, so I don't like the fact that my home can react to when I come home, but I like the idea that a smart home could react differently to when you adjust your thermostat, turn your lights on, do all that kind of stuff. I love the idea of that, but I don't implement it personally just because of privacy issues. I mean, I have a Google Home. I have some smart switches, but my Google Home is actually on a smart switch to only be on during my work hours so that it's off in my personal time, and I have to manually turn it on just because I don't like the idea of it constantly listening to me, even if that might be a little ridiculous. We don't really know what Google's doing, and Google probably doesn't even know what they're doing.
And what did we say about Gmail a few minutes ago and looking after our security? Yes.
Well, I guess security and privacy are quite different to me, but are the same in a way. Like, using Gmail, I'm not under the illusion that they aren't crawling through every interaction that I do within my email, everyone who's emailing me, what I engage with, what I don't. Like, they definitely are crawling all that data just like they do the rest of the internet that we all end up reaching. But from a privacy standpoint, also, like, I don't. I'm not a big person on social media, so I don't really use technology in that way. Outside of that, like, I mainly just use technology on a personal level, to be perfectly honest, or professional level, not really on a personal level too much.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, I'm working on a project at the moment, and I needed to download TikTok, which I'm not exactly happy about because I don't need another. I don't need another thing in my life that's going to waste time. And I've managed to find that maybe 90% of the content on there is totally relevant, dumb, stupid, all of those words. But there's 10% where I'm going, oh yeah, that's kind of funny, or oh yeah, I can learn something from that. But man, it's just not.
Yeah, but you
don't need this stuff.
But you, or us, all three of us, as a 35-plus-year-old peoples, we look at it and go, that's just dumb. I look at 13-year-olds and 11-year-olds who go, wow, and spend hours just trolling through it and go, it's completely different mindset. And that whole digital experience.
Back in my day, we had MySpace.
Well, I mean, equally nowadays, the 40, 50, 60-year-olds are all on Facebook. So, yes, I mean, yeah. I personally go on Facebook and don't understand why people would want to consume the nonsense that's clearly nonsense, but yet people do.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to share photos of the dogs with their grandparents. That's why.
Yeah.
Well, my 80-year-old mum, when she was alive, used to fundraise through Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
Because whenever she'd go on a trip, she would do her little knitting and all of her little teddy bears, and then she would stick them on Facebook and people would buy them. But she didn't know about Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah. Mitch, what's changed for you in the technology space? Is there something that you possibly can do now that you wouldn't have been able to do until recently?
I mean, everything that I'm doing now in email was kind of a pipe dream back when I started. But I guess one example that kind of stands out for me is more on the website. I'm working on a side project that's going to be an iOS and Android app. And we're actually using Ionic to be able to build it. And Ionic, you just build a Angular app. So I get to write HTML, CSS, JavaScript, use the Angular framework that I'm already familiar with, and I'm actually able to build a iOS and Android app. So the idea of that even 5 years ago wasn't really possible. There were some like transpiling type libraries, but back then even they were very clunky. But the idea of being able to take my skills that I've been building, in building web interfaces and apply that to an app without having to learn Objective-C or Swift Java or anything else. And just that level of abstraction, I never would have thought at the beginning of my career would ever be possible.
No, there's going to be little black boxes that connect everything soon. But I've always thought Android, Apple, completely separate, never needed the two together.
Yeah. And also, I guess, as far as email, I mean, the AMP for email that I mentioned, never thought that we would ever get any sort of JavaScript-like functionality in email.
Inside email, no, God.
Yeah, never would have thought that would ever happen for the security reasons, but also just because email doesn't really evolve. It's basically the same technology we've been using for the last, 15 years, 20 years, maybe even longer. Email hasn't changed all that much in its foundation, where the web has changed dramatically in its foundation. I mean, JavaScript today is nothing like JavaScript at the beginning of my career. It's actually quite useful now. It didn't used to be.
It's still structured poorly, but
still structured poorly, and you can still make a lot of mistakes very easily, but it's a lot better than it used to be. I mean, even the progression in some of the other languages that I used to use a lot more but don't now. I mean, PHP was very unstructured 12 years ago when I was using it on WordPress sites, and now, I mean, it's just grown in sophistication and added some of that structure and some of those mechanisms to really kind of change the way that not only we write it, but it changes the result for the user as well. So
over the last 12 months, with the massive increase of phishing emails going out, how's that affecting your emails that you're sending out? How are you really trying to separate, I'm not a phishing email, I'm a real email, even though I'm automated at the same time?
Sender, it's basically like sender authentication. So there's different methods that you can do as a bulk sender to kind of get better reputation with each one of the major email clients, but also to kind of avoid spam filters for some of the more, business instances of email, because you can use different types of spam filters that aren't necessarily out there just from the major Gmail, Yahoo, Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I think is just keeping your content consistent and making your brand consistent. So if people come to your emails and they get a completely different experience or a completely different tone of voice, I think that people would be a little more skeptical of that email being a little bit suspicious. But definitely just those authentication methods that are out there as just a best practice for bulk sending will keep us kind of safe from being, as those spam filters get increased, will keep us in the inbox in the long term.
Yeah, as the treasurer of a very large not-for-profit organisation, I get so many emails that state it's from a very good friend of mine, but actually has their name in it, and it looks like it's coming from them, and they say, could you give me a quick call? Could you just respond to this? And I get probably 2 or 3 a day, all perfectly named. But if you click on the email address, you can see some really interesting statements.
Yeah, it's become a very big problem, isn't it?
And I think, email has kind of seen different waves of spam kind of blowing up and of phishing attacks blowing up and all these different, methods that have kind of evolved on the black hat side. There's always kind of a balance. And ultimately, I think like email is such a foundation for business, but also in personal life. It's your entrance to the internet. Without an email address, you can't really have an account with any application out there. You could still use Google, but you can't use Facebook. There's very few applications that you can actually, it's kind of your entrance to the internet. So I think that as much as, the black hat side is ramping up to try to exploit, the white hat side is going to kind of counteract that in every way that they can, to try to keep email as safe as it can be, knowing that, it's definitely not the safest means of communication.
That's
I agree.
Absolutely awesome. Yeah.
Mitch, we have 3 questions that we ask everyone. I know you've listened to this before, so you know what these questions are. And what would you do anything differently if you had a chance in your career?
No, I don't think I would. Kind of based on the same idea, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. With software, you change one thing, you get an unintended consequence of something else changing that you didn't intend. And I'm very happy with the way my career has gone. Although I didn't set out to do any of this, I kind of fell into it. I am happy with where I ended up, and I wouldn't really change anything about my career.
Brilliant. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you have been doing?
Originally, I was going to be a sound engineer, but I kind of quickly abandoned that to be a developer. So I guess if I go even further back, I would probably be something to do with herpetology or field research. I love being out in nature, and I've had a weird, odd fascination with the things that everyone hates, being lizards, snakes, amphibians, all the things that everyone's scared of. I didn't get that. For some reason, I didn't get that when I was a kid. So maybe I would be doing something with that.
Do you step into that now at all? Do you go out for long walks? Do you go out to visit nature and to do your little bits of herpetology here and there?
Yeah. We had a holiday weekend. I hiked 34 miles across different parts of the Sierra Mountains. So I hike pretty much every weekend. And the entire time, all my friends could attest to this. I'm constantly looking for anything, any snake, any lizard, anything that I could photograph, anything I could check out. That's kind of always my main goal when hiking. Secondary, I guess, would be just the nature and the quiet. And, I grew up in the country, so I appreciate that, like slower pace, less noise, just quiet.
Yeah.
Serenity.
Oh,
yeah.
So in contrast to that, do you have any predictions for the future of technology?
Somewhat. I'm not sure that it's a prediction. It's more, I guess, of a hunch potentially. So we're already seeing privacy awareness kind of in the last 2 years between GDPR, CCPA. They keep adding, I guess, on like every few months, there's a new privacy law that's kind of modeled after that. And then now recently with this iOS 14 update or 14.5 update, there's a lot of changes in iOS trying to protect people's privacy. My hope is that the marketing industry will take that challenge and kind of elevate the quality of the experiences we're offering. And when people do give us access to the data, their personal data, that we don't abuse it as much as utilize it to really maximize their experience. So every brand interaction now has been quite easy, to be perfectly honest, because you can get massive amounts of data on people that they have no idea you have. And I think with that going away, it's going to really force marketers to kind of elevate our own game and really provide people with the quality experience, even if we don't have the insights into them as a person.
Agree. Mitch, it's been lovely talking to you, and I hope that that the weather there gets less grey and you get more sunshine.
Thanks. This has been fun. I
Mitch,
appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Thanks very much.
What's that? Do you continue saving your password in an Excel spreadsheet? Well, my friend, either your habits need to be changed or you are going to be exposed to a cyber attack very soon. At TeamScale, we have decades of experience assisting our customers in securing their business and optimizing their process, making them more competitive in the market. Be bold, be smarter, be faster with TeamScale. Visit teamscale.com to learn more.